to survive at this point. It also appears that a lot of the politicians in South Carolina can't decide yet whether they want him to survive or not, because he is, after all, a lame duck. Even though he has an awful lot of enemies, they're not quite pushing him over the edge yet.
Yeah. Well, I suspect partly it has to do with the recognition that there's a hallway of mirrors here when it comes to moralism. I mean, there are a lot of secrets being kept in a lot of closets by a lot of people who hold them. So there's a kind of identification with Brother Sanford, Mr. Sanford, Governor Sanford, because of the silliness that is in sharp contrast to his usual control. But I think there's a bigger story here, too, is that, yeah, on both sides of the aisle, people constantly stray. But the recriminations about them are in inverse proportion to their ability to beat people up who fall in public. I mean, Mr. Sanford, when he was a congressman, regaled us with story after story about why Mr. Clinton should just simply resign because he was ashamed. And I think now your words come back to bite you in those hind parts.
Is hypocrisy enough to take him down?
Concession of that point, the legitimacy of other people's feelings in the same way when it comes to some of the harsh judgments that are rendered. I think this new devilishness that you spoke of is true. Perhaps the media itself sees its own mortality flashing before its eyes, because there are a bunch of secrets in the media as well, we all know. So I think that my problem is that, you know, have that same kind of capacity for empathy and compassion when you're dealing with, I don't know, health care, welfare reform. How about taking $700 million in stimulus money? I mean, Sanford, you want us to understand, and I completely do, given my own sin and recognition of my frailty, that I get that, but yeah, not at all. But what I am suggesting is that however, is that feel that same kind of empathy and compassion in other elements of your political body,
I agree,
not
but
just in your heart.
The thing that people do like about Mark Sanford is he is a true government. The person who most wants to be good is also going to be the one who falls the hardest. I mean, we try to kind of repair what's wrong in our lives with our public works. And so the Republicans are always going to look worse when they fall. The harder they...
And they cannot achieve perfection.
But I think it's because
they're arguing for some good things.
But I think it's the harsh judgmentalism. It's not the fact that the concession of the fact that you're going to mess up is true. We all know that coming in the door. But the Republicans, or more broadly, the conservatives, tend to think that they've got some kind of copyright or lock on appropriate behavior, that the liberals or the leftists are the ones who are going to hell in a handbasket. And God forbid, when we mess up, at least we're heading in the right direction. But when the liberals mess up, not only they're messing up, but they're messing up on the way to hell.
I think that ultimately, the last of it. I don't think you're going to hear any Republicans.
Time to go to work. And as a teenager in the 1970s, I was one of the 10 million who had that poster. I think every teenage boy my age had it in their house. And finally, of course, that was overshadowed by Michael Jackson. We first saw him become a star as a little boy, only 9 years old. A superstar in 1983 with Thriller, best-selling album of all time, and that moonwalk that he did on the 25th anniversary of MTV. Everyone remembered it. And then 20 years really of pain, drug abuse, charges of child abuse. And he also really seemed to transform in front of our eyes. And Michael, I want to come to you first on this, because I got to tell you, personally, I was struggling as we watched all this, whether we're all paying just way too much attention to all this. And I know there are an awful lot of people who feel the other way. Try to put it in context.
Well, I think that, well, obviously Farrah Fawcett and you and I and millions of other guys, and I suspect women, certainly saw her as an icon. But it's not just that poster; it's also the burning bed, right? That she, just the burning bed and what that meant to
just laughing,
feminism here, at least on the film.
Here,
Ed McMahon, look, you can be a second banana, but you can make that a first-rate career. Michael Jackson, I think, look, represents, I don't know, a film, the real-life version of The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Born as a shriveled old man, he dies as a youth. Michael Jackson as a 9-year-old prodigy. We have to go back to people like, I don't know, Mozart composing at 4 and 5. Michael Jackson knew at the age of 6 that he liked William Hart. Who's William Hart? The lead singer of the Delphonics. What 8-year-old kid knows who William Hart is? That's the kind of genius he possessed. And he was seen as a miniature adult wrapped in this, chocolate cherubic face afro halo. And there he was representing for the world. He was signed the year Martin Luther King Jr. was murdered. The next year, he and his brothers formed the Jackson 5 to take the post-soul civil rights generation forward. And I think that in that sense, the tragedy is that later on in his life, with all these accusations, the whitening of his skin and the Europeanization of his image lost what he was on the inside. And that was a metaphor for black people in large.
Wow. Interesting. There was so much to say there. Look, it struck me that we're making a big deal of